All right, so with that said, welcome to the Hack Your Widgets COVES webinar, and Gretchen, please take it away.
Hello, good afternoon, good morning, depending on where you are in what time zone. My name's Gretchen Haupt. I use she, her pronouns. I am a research and evaluation and research associate at the Science Museum of Minnesota. And I am here to talk a little bit about how to make your dashboard work for you, how to customize some things, and how to, in some ways, kind of make the widgets do things they maybe weren't intended to do. I was really grateful for Alex to send out a really quick form. I got some great ideas for things that I hadn't ever thought about using the dashboard to do. And I'm sure it's really great food for thought for Alex and Ryan as they're thinking about how to make dashboards more useful. So I started playing with the back end creation of things when we came back from COVID, and there were a lot of things on our dashboard that weren't quite in date, and it was going to be kind of a overwhelming process to overhaul the whole dashboard. But Alex and Allison said, anybody can make their own widgets. And I said, oh, really? So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna show you two examples of dashboards that I've made for some internal SMM groups who have specific questions, want to use our exit data in ways that are really particular to their groups and their project needs. And then I'm gonna go over the basics of how to edit, how to use private pages, how to sort of set those things up big picture. And then I'll go over some of the tools in the sandbox that we have, which is like the types of widgets, which are these little boxes of visualizations and numbers. I'll talk a little bit about like what different ones might be good for, what they do. I'll walk through customizing the widget appearances. You notice these are different colors. Some of them have lines, bars, they go different ways. There's a lot of ways that you can customize it to make it match your organization's branding or to highlight specific things the way that you want. And then I'll get into a little more nitty-gritty about how do you actually customize the content to show what you want to show. And if we have time and I haven't completely lost everyone, I'll talk about the many methods of filtering. There's a lot of ways to drill down on the data as it is on the dashboard, which sometimes you can set that up to be a little more accessible and less overwhelming. But if you do have power users or you yourself are really familiar, there's a lot of really complex filtering and logic that you can do to answer questions and have it right at your fingertips. You don't need to do an export. You don't need to worry about Excel or SPSS or R. You can just query your dashboard and it can get you some quick results. And then have some time for question and answer. So this is our SMM's main institutional data summary page. And I'm going to try and pay attention if there's like hands or questions, you can just sort of like pop up and I'll, if maybe Alex or Ryan want to flag me down if I'm moving too fast. And just full transparency, Qualtrics changes stuff on the interface, and I don't always recognize it or I don't always catch it. So hopefully I know where everything is. I was just playing with it yesterday, but so these are all of the pages that Alex and Allison have built for us over the years for our main login. The SMM has a login for anybody in our organization can log in and look at our dashboard. We do have a specific research and evaluation login where that's set up a little bit differently, but this is the login that anybody at SMM has access to. And we have a couple of pages. Most of these have some widgets that don't populate anymore because the survey has changed or they're just not of use anymore. But down here are these private pages. And one of the first specific dashboards that I was asked to build was for our museum access and equity group, who are had some really specific questions around demographics and who was coming to the museum and how could we understand and benchmark growth in certain areas and experience and motivation. So I will go into some of the detailed pieces on here, but I just wanted to give an example of what some of these things look like. We have just the number of respondents that this dashboard represents. We have our locked filters. We can change the date. We do have some income categories and last visits and fiscal year filters. And this is one of the things I'll get into about filtering with using the number count as kind of a pseudo filter, because one of the questions this group had was how we ask about different types of access ticketing programs. Our Great Ticks, which is tied to income, and our Indigenous Museum access, which is not, but they are not not easy, just like checkbox filters, especially because there is a something else, and people will often write that in. So there are some logic that will grab certain keywords, like they used SNAP benefit, discount, low income. So the cool part about this is then if I want to say, just if I just want to look at our access audience, I click on that, it's a clickable filter. Then we can see our experience ratings, which Net Promoter Score is a little small. And we have our comments. So it's going to reset that to the default. They were also interested in seeing race and ethnicity, both the recoded to 100%, as well as what people marked in their original selection, the multiple responses, because this is a group that really does want to have a sense and be able to drill down. We have a list of how many people in this group did not answer the race question, or if we wanted to filter by anyone who selected American Indian, Alaskan Native, Asian or Asian American, Black African American, Hispanic, Latinx, Native Hawaiian Pacific Islander. So this is a kind of a quick way to filter.
Hey
So
Gretchen, just quickly, are you going to talk about how to make private pages next,
yes,
or okay, great.
yes, I will.
There was a question
And
in the
then
chat
just
about them, so yeah.
yes, real quick. This is another page that we put together. The Science Museum is really interested in growing our adult only audiences pilot or audience segment. So this page is really kind of focused on being able to drill down into how our adult audiences are experiencing, when did they last visit, being able to compare different group composition and having that readily. So what I am going to do now is I'm going to log into this page, which is our other login. And so are people seeing the little pop-up box when I click on institutional data summary? I'm not always sure if what shows on screen sharing with the dashboard, but they're up here where it says institutional data summary 1 through 8. There's a little down caret. And when I click on that, I get a list of all of the different pages that are available to me. And I have these private pages down here that I've been working on. But there's a word up here that says add private page. And if you click on that, you will get a new page. We can retitle it. I'm going to say demo. It might take a little while for this title up here to update. So when you create a new page, there will be nothing here. It'll say now editing. If you hit done editing, there's nothing there, but you come up to this little edit dashboard. It's a box with a pencil in it. When you click there, that's what opens up the editing features. Right now, there are absolutely no filters on here, and you can add whole page, dashboard level page filters, but you can also add a filter to a specific widget. One thing that I usually add to at the page level is the institution, because otherwise it will just give you an aggregate. So, and I'm hoping this is showing, this is one thing I didn't necessarily think of is like what will screen share capture in terms of pop-ups. But there's a filter here, institution name. I only have access to Science Museum of Minnesota. So I'm going to set it as that. I can lock that so that it will only show me SMM data. But now I'm going to go in and add my first widget. You would add, actually, I'm going to go back to my example pages. Alex, are you seeing pop-ups when I drop in? Like if I hit add widget, it shows stuff?
Yes. Hang on, do that, hover over something. Yeah, I see widget divider group. Yep. And then we see
And
the
so
list of widget
you see the
types.
list. Okay, cool.
Yep.
So these are all of the different things that you can add to your page. The gauge chart is what I've been using for Net Promoter Score and what shows up on most people's Net Promoter Scores. The number chart is when you saw those sort of like response count numbers. Then I haven't used journey chart. That's a new one on me. Vertical and horizontal bars. I have some examples of the same data presented in both ways. Line charts are really good for showing longitudinal and change over time. You can also do some fun breakdown area trends for data over time. Like if you want to see the percentage of your outstanding ratings across a whole year or across weeks, you can use those. The breakdown bar is what the overall experience rating is usually presented in. It's 100% and has the different categories broken down. I'll also talk a little bit about tables, and those can be really concise ways to just have disaggregations. And the response ticker is a good way to highlight the open-ended comment data that we have. And so there's some fun things there. So what I've got set up here is just looking at Net Promoter Score. I have this is all of our data. This is from this year. I'm actually going to go to all time. And I've laid out several different ways to look at Net Promoter Score based on last visit, based on membership, and I'm starting with group type. So then I can show you how I would build this. So this is an example of one of the limitations with the main basic dashboard page is you have to have multiple windows open if you want to compare different things. So you could build a page or have a page where you frequently want to see differences across these different demographic and characteristics that your surveys collect. Net Promoter Score is really good when you have a large volume of respondents. When you get under the like 100, 150, then it can get a little questionable in the swings. But so I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to build out a chart for our adults and children. So I'm going to hit add widget gauge chart. So when you are in this, you can set your title, whatever you want. I'm going to say adults and children. This description is something that doesn't show up on the dashboard, but you'll notice there's like a little I that's an information that gives you some more detail if you were to click on that widget or download it. I like to check show number of responses. And then you have to add your metrics. The default is going to be count. And so this is all 10,000 responses. This is a net promoter. It has its own metric. Everything else is mostly going to be counts when we're talking about it, but net promoter. And then you need to tell it where. Why is it not finding me? Oh, I know why. Um, this one always net promote. I misspelled it. Net promoter score. So all of the variables that your survey collects will be in these fields. The Science Museum has had a long history of them, so we have quite a few things. You can type in and search if you know what the variable name is, or you can click, there's a little drop down here that I'm not sure if you can see, and you can just scroll through to try and find what you're looking for. So we've got net promoter score. So that's showing that our overall net promoter score is for 10,000 people is 76. But I want to only look at adults and children. So then this is where we get into, we could filter the whole page, but if we want to look side by side, we would add a filter. And this is just something that I remember. The variable for number of children in group is n child. How many children or adolescents were in your group? That makes a filter. If I click here, there's a little slider bar. And I want there to be between 1 and 10. So that says that then that means our group of adults and children, net promoter score is 78. I've made some groups to kind of help keep things together. You can kind of like, under this add function, you can add a group and it'll make a little box and it'll keep all those things together. And then you can drag and resize things a little bit, and that's probably not going to match exactly. But now we can say that our adult-only group's net promoter score is 72, adults and children is 78. If you want to go back in and edit it, there's a little 3 dots button that you would hover over, and that has a drop-down menu, which you may or may not be able to see. You hit edit. If you want, you can go in and change the colors, and you can have your thresholds. So if you say, we want to make sure that all of our groups are having, like, our goal is 80. If you change that to your goal of 80, then that will turn the whole bar orange if you are not at that. But if you're like, nope, we're good if we're over 60, then you can change your colors either by just selecting something or adding a hex code in here. So that's getting into a little bit about the visual of that. So we're going to set this to 80 because we have really high expectations that adults and children are going to definitely want to recommend this. One of the other types of widgets are these bar charts. And so this is a few different ways that I've put together our overall experience rating. I'm not as big a fan of the vertical bar because the labels at the bottom get really long. This is probably how you're used to seeing it. So I'm going to go in and edit. Actually, I will just create a new one.
And Gretchen, whenever you have a moment, Julie asked in the chat, do you email this page to people? Do you set it up to automatically email? Do you give them access just via Qualtrics? Like, sort of how you use these specific pages would be awesome.
Uh, we have because our we have a login that anybody is able to access. We just encourage people to log in and access it as a web page. But we have for meetings and groups, we have exported and shared it as but we have not set anything up as like a regular push of data. But that's a great question and definitely something to for other people to kind of think about in terms of usability. So I'm gonna say for a vertical bar chart, if I wanted to call this my OER, we're gonna go in, you have to add the metric, it's a count. Under options, you can either have it as just numbers. Percents are usually the most helpful. You can set how many decimal places are reported. If you like to, you want everything to add up to 100%, then you might want to add some decimal places. If you're not as big of an issue where a rounding error might be a problem and it's just neater to have whole numbers. Then we want to add what's the thing we're interested in. We're going to go to OER and not quite what we're looking for. Categories aren't in the right order. What is this NA not available? What is 109,000%? I don't know how to fix this or why this is, but if you go back into count, there's an option to show your count as percentage of total. So that's gonna, now we've got 1%, 8, 39. That makes sense. If I only wanted to see a overall experience rating of members, you can add a filter. And right now it's set to all, but I could just say, yes, I only want to see overall experience ratings of members. But let's go in and lay this out in a way that maybe is a little easier to read because the default is alphabetical. So there's the data tab over here. There's also a display tab, and this is where you can really get in and like make it look the way that you want it to. If you drop down axes, if you uncheck that, you're not going to have any labels, but we do want those. If we check that, we're going to have our title overall of what the variable is. The default is sort by label in ascending alphabetical order, but you can also do it by value. So if you have something where you want it to be the highest rating to the lowest in that order, or you can do custom. So once you do that, you'll be able to get these little waffles over here that lets you drag things up and down. As it happens, for the most part, it's in the order that we want it. But I'm going to go ahead and pop this not available down here because that eventually I'm going to show you how to get rid of that. Like if you have a category that you don't want to show up, then you can do that. Let's say that we want to really highlight outstanding because we have a goal of having a certain percentage outstanding. There's a little color block here. I'm going to say I want that to be orange. You can also go in and type in if you have the specific hex code for your branding information. So now my outstanding is going to be orange. Right now, you can hover over it and it'll tell you the label and the percentage, but maybe you want people to just be able to look across. So this little slider for show data values. I like personally to be able to hover over and see how many people actually answered that. So that out of 3,967 members who answered the OER question, 1676 gave it an outstanding. Sometimes that's helpful if you want to like recompile things or just to double check things. But that's an option. When we are talking about like, what is this not available? And I think this is because we didn't ask overall experience rating ever since we started collecting data or something has changed. It's an NA, but I don't want it to calculate the percentage, including this non-applicable. You can customize data availability and uncheck that. And I have to remember where the check mark is so that it will recalculate that because I don't think it's just, this still is not going to add up to 100%. I think because this is 82, 88, 89. Yeah, so that 11% is still there.
I think that's a very, very old category from like pre COVID. It's not going to be a concern for most folks on here. And
Yeah.
actually, I even forgot about it, so I think I could probably get rid of it so that it
Okay.
doesn't
But it is
mess with
good
anyone in the future.
to be able to show people how if they want to get that out. I believe back under data, there is oh, I remember how I had to do this. You can tell it don't show that category, or you can go into your filter and add the filter and say, I don't want this to be included. So you're only selecting those 5 active categories. So now instead of 42%, it is 47% gave an outstanding rating. So if you have a category that you just don't want to highlight, say that we only really care about outstanding and excellent, you can go and uncheck those and you'll just have those 2 particular ones. So if this was a see-do or a motivation, like you really just want to isolate one thing, you can change that visibility. So I'm actually, just so I don't get confused, it's good to have your titles there. So some of the other things that I have here is I've highlighted our excellent and outstanding as our E+ ratings, and I've sort of de-emphasized the good, fair, poor. I have done the typical sort of breakout bar with the same color scheme. And I've also used the table, which I can show people how to build too, to have by membership. So our ratings of OER with what percentage of members, yes, said outstanding, excellent, fair. So you can do a numerical side-by-side comparison, which might be easier for some people to understand. This is the same exact chart to the right, that same breakdown. It's just, I just haven't organized the rows in the right order. But how do you actually do this? So the way this is set up, where we were in our vertical bar chart, you can change it from here, but if you do that, it actually eliminates all of your settings. So I don't recommend going in. I just recommend rebuilding it, or you don't do this to see what it would look like in a different format because you'll lose all your work. So we still have our counts. Down here, before there was just the x-axis. If you add the data series, then it will add these additional side-by-side bars so you can visually compare them. So what that would look like in my up here. So right now we just have metrics, count, data series. And I was really excited for a second because I got in that survey, or that form, somebody wanted to compare weekend and weekdays and wanted to compare days of the week. And that exists as a variable but I don't think it populates now that the dashboard is live. I think that is something that is, so I was super excited to be able to do that. And then when I was looking at this year's data, it said, sorry, not going to work. But we can say, what's a good dichotomous variable where we have, let's say last visit. Prior to your most recent visit, when was the last time? So I add that, and this is kind of an overwhelming table, but let's go in, and I'm just going to get rid of, I'm going to say I'm really interested in the new first-time visitors compared to people who haven't been in the last 2 years. A little easier to read there. And when you're setting this up to do a side by side like this, now it's showing the percentage of total. So our percentages, this is all of these percentages are not adding up right because we're also looking at only a portion of the data. But we can now say, I actually want to see the percentage of our last visit breakdown. And so when I add that, then we're able to sort of say like, oh, people who haven't been in 5 to 10 years are giving a larger percentage of poor overall ratings. This is a lot better when you have maybe one or two two different characteristics like membership or non-member, or trying to think of what other sort of either or tourist, local, only, mixed group, those sorts of things. You can set this up in a chart that way. The last sort of fun thing I'm going to show before I pause and see if there's other questions or if we want to like really get into some of the nuts and bolts of filtering is, whoops, the open-ended comments. So one of the widgets that you can use is why am I not seeing it now? Response ticker. And the content, we're going to say for the people who gave an outstanding OER rating. And I am going to actually, this is something I just figured out yesterday, so I'm actually going to look at this one. This is one that I had set up as the OER, the overall OER follow-up, which I think is an older question. I think it's asked differently now. It used to be, what's the main reason for the rating that you gave? And now if somebody selects poor, fair, or good, it says what can be improved. If somebody marks excellent, what was the main reason for your rating? If somebody chooses outstanding, I think it's more akin to like, what was the highlight of your visit? Like what made it outstanding? So this is the older OER comments. And I did a filter of I wanted any comment that mentioned dinosaurs. So I can go down and add a filter. And I used does anything in this comment contain the word dinosaur? Which then makes a list of 44 comments that had the word dinosaurs in it, and it helpfully highlights your word. So somebody had requested, how do I easily count the number of times certain words show up in comments? And you can either do it this way where you can have that count there, or you could just use one of the number widgets and apply the same kind of filtering. Then I started getting really excited, like, well, let's talk about comments about food. And but I'm using multiple data sources here because we have somebody might have said something in their OER comment. Somebody might have just left a comment at the end of the survey. And my filter looks a little more complicated. Any of the following contain the word food. So now I have 77 comments across all time that specifically say something about food.
Gretchen, do
I
you know if
could,
you can do multiple words? Summer from the Bell
yes,
was asking, like dino, dinosaur, dinosaurs, what or
yes.
dinos, whatever.
Um, I haven't tried with doing it all in one box, like if there's any sort of like wild card coding, but you can set up multiple conditions to say, does does it include food? Does it include any of the following are true? And you would just keep adding new conditions. So like if I also wanted to know if a comment include contains the word um, let's say snack because we thought snack might show up instead. So then I can save that. And yes, it that caught 84 or that caught another handful. I have not experimented with this to see if I add the little asterisk, if it treats it as a wild card, but yeah, please get a cafe and snacks for purchases. So you can use multiple. Um, when we're talking about logic, the any versus all can get really complicated. You can have all of the following and then have a new set of conditions of any of these work. So you can just sort of go down the rabbit hole with your logics and your filters. But this is really a really fun way to dig into your open-ended comments in a way that's easy for people to see. Um, then what I added here is this is older all data, so it doesn't work all the time, but you can have the date. This was a day ago. Which food court was open? You can see how old is this comment. There's this category down here, which is ticker value. You're probably used to seeing your Net Promoter Score attached to the comment for why did you give that reason. But you could but maybe if you're looking at specifically like food as it relates to Net Promoter Score, like is any of this tracking? And then I had done a similar thing with the Net Promoter Score of how long ago and what was the rating. So I'm gonna, whoops, pause here because I've been talking for a while and are actually almost at time. I'm gonna take my screen sharing down, or no, I'll leave it up. Just if anybody wants me to like demonstrate something specific or go back to anything because I'm sure I talked a mile a minute. And I will also always put myself out there if somebody wants to just problem solve, like send me a challenge and I will happily figure out how to do it with you and walk through it.
I wanted to add a quick note about the filtering between individual widgets and the full page. My understanding is that the individual chart or widget filters sort of take precedence over a full
Mhm.
page. So if you set, like Gretchen had set, a lot of those Net Promoter Score to be specific to like members or groups with children or anything like that, if you then were to put additional filters at the top of the page, especially if they contradicted, the individual chart filter would hold. So it's just important to kind of, if you're like sending it around or something like that, it might be good to put a note in
Mhm.
the title of the widget, like that it's static or I don't know, anything like that, if you're worried about anyone misinterpreting it.
And you'll see that in the individual exhibition widgets that we build out. So if you change the time and it is not inclusive of that, sometimes you get
Mhm.
funky things. So sometimes if you get it's having Gretchen was saying having the total or being able to hover and over the ends, hover over the sample size, that can be a good check for am I catching roughly the right number of people and be able to catch when you have some of those filters in conflict.
Yeah, we actually just ran into that before or earlier yesterday on some of our exhibits stuff. We're still populating even though those exhibits haven't been on the floor for a while. I'm like, oh, there's a widget specific filter. Summer.
Hi. Okay, quick question. So you said there's like private pages and then non-private. I don't remember what the other ones were called. So I'm assuming that, say, marketing is constantly asking you for the same info, you would make a non-private page with stuff that marketing might be interested in that they can just log into and use. What would you use a private page for?
So I think the difference, and this is maybe a better question for Alex to answer. The private pages are ones that I don't think Alex or Allison or anyone can see those on their end. Like they are just specific to our login, whereas these pages up here are ones that they have made for us and are like assigned to our login. So you could, for your marketing department, just go and add a private page. They would be when if they have the login information, they would be able to access any of these pages that show up in the dropdown, but nobody outside of your organizational login would be able to see that information. You
That's
could also export it as a PDF and send it to people or set it up as an automatic email report as well. But that's the main difference between these are ones that are created. I'm not sure how that happens, but
it's a function of how the Qualtrics license we have has individual user seats. So we are the admins of the dashboards, and then we give out the individual seats to each organization. Qualtrics doesn't expect us to use
Mhm.
dashboards in the way that we do. So there are some funny things with the way that they're labeling things where they're expecting a different use case. So Gretchen's correct that those default pages are the ones that we build out, and private pages are ones that you, under that username, build out.
Yeah, and I'll just add like SMM has so many of those like public pages that we built. It's a little bit of a unique situation because we worked on those years and years ago when COVES had like 10 museums and we were just getting started with the dashboard. So folks who joined COVES a million years ago, it might be a little bit different. We don't have quite as much capacity to build, individualized pages for institutions anymore. That said, if are always welcome to talk to us if you do think it would make a really big difference for you. But what I can also recommend with the private pages, if you have like you want to send it to, or you want like your marketing department to have access to it, to use a private page function and then send the PDF, do the export function the same way you would, or share the dashboard login with them, and then they'll be able to see the private pages, and it'll function exactly like having a public page. I remember with SMM, we went back and forth a lot about whether to use private pages or whether we were going to help you guys make public pages because of like access stuff and other people using the data. But if you can find people that you know, trust well enough and that you can work together on
mhm.
understanding what they're looking at, then I think using a private page is going to be the way to go. Another thing you can do if
Thank
you don't want to start from scratch is that you can make a private copy of the like institutional data summary and just delete stuff that you don't want. If you want to make a page that's just demographics or all the data but not so much of the data, you can just make a private copy and then delete things if you'd like to do that too.
Mm.
Sometimes I do that.
Was actually just wondering about that. So thank you, Alex.
I just double
So
checked on a random user that people can do that, and yes, you can do that.
I
the I think the one last thing that I will walk through a little bit more on is this, like using a widget in a way that I don't think it's actually intended to be used is our, and now I've put this in the way and I can't find it, the numbers chart. And so right now this literally just shows a number, but sometimes like there's something that there isn't really a good way to get at. One of those is missing data. If you need to know how many people didn't answer a question, and this all happens with filters. And so there's this little box down here. You may have noticed that most of your widgets, if you click on a segment of a pie chart or you click on a bar, it applies that as a filter to your whole page. This doesn't always work consistently, and I think it's because I'm breaking it. But if you add a filter, and I'm going to say for race, you can just go and have these, but that's not exactly helpful because it doesn't have your missing data. But if you go and you add an advanced filter, you're going to pull up that kind of similar logic looking box. And if I add this and I say it is empty, I'm going to make this any. Race is empty. Race includes, prefer not to say, and sometimes I also include self-describe because a lot of those, not always, are um, fatuous responses. They're not telling us anything. So now I have any of the following are true, and that's going to tell me that over the course of all time, 1,188 people did not give us a meaningful response there. And I'm just going to make it a little smaller. If I close that out to be done editing, which now makes this a little more static, if I click on this, hopefully, yes, it is treating it as a filter. So now I can look very easily across all of those Net Promoter Scores that I just built to say, first visit, people who didn't tell us their race, ethnicity, members who didn't share that information, adult only, overall. So if you like are wanting to sort of like dig into variable combinations, or I only want to look at Net Promoter overall ratings for people who gave who had these words in their comments, you can, and it's just you can have a whole series and kind of treat them like buttons. The reason it doesn't always work sometimes is hypothetically you should be able to click it and it removes it. Does not happen here. You do have to go back and reset to default. So that's what I'm going to end with. If anyone has questions for me that I can answer right now, if anyone wants to send me an email, I'm happy to talk about. I will put I need to find the chat. I'm so used to Google Meets now I can't find anything in Zoom. But I'm going to put my email, and anyone is welcome to reach out to me if you want to like troubleshoot, give me a challenge to build something for you.
Qualtrics has some decent documentation depending on what you're trying to do with it. I found it way easier to go to a search engine and search it rather than use Qualtrics search. But they do have some, again, depending on what you're trying to do, decent documentation as well. And
Has anyone tried asking ChatGPT? Because I ask ChatGPT how to do Excel formulas all the time.
Haven't tried that.
So I think I have a better conversationalist than ChatGPT. So if, I like talking to people about this, so and I like the puzzles.
Well, cool, Gretchen. Thank you so much for doing that. And, I love that Gretchen is available to talk about this as well, since the Coves team often gets a little bit swamped. So you can absolutely feel free to reach out to us. Allison and I have the most experience, I think, with the dashboards, but it's great that, Gretchen is an additional resource here with all the time she spent in it. I do know that Beth Katz at the Natural History Museum of Los Angeles County has done a lot of work with private pages as well. So there's definitely some folks who've and I think Caitlin Tracy Miller, who used to be at the Cincinnati Art Museum, did a bunch of it in the CAM dashboard too. So don't worry, it might be a little overwhelming at first, but since they're private pages, you're not going to break anything on the main dashboard. You can mess around, explore, see what's confusing, and then give us an email or a call, and we can help you work it out. So thank you again, Gretchen. That was awesome.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it. It was a nice thing to think about. Something when we have control.
Yes. Before we end, I'm going to find the URL for our YouTube channel where you can access all of our previous. Oh, Allison had it
Got
ready.
it.
Thank you, Allison. All of our previous recordings. We do tend to post them really quickly, so I'm going to get this posted right away as soon as it finishes converting the recording. And you can watch it soon.
Thank you all.
Thanks again, everyone.
Bye-bye.
We'll see you next
Bye.
month.